700 years ago, within sight of Stirling Castle, a small Scottish army decisively defeated a much larger English force, nearly 3 times its size. The Battle of Bannockburn was a major victory in the Scottish Wars of Independence and a defining moment in the nation's history. Today, things are quite different. Relations are civil, and the two nations are tied into a political and economic union. But a new battle is underway, a political battle which could see the end of a 300-year-old marriage.
Our objective is a Scotland free to reach that full potential, a Scotland that's more prosperous, fairer, a voice for peace and reconciliation in the world, a Scotland that is independent. That is our vision.
For many decades, the Scottish National Party has been campaigning for Scotland's independence from the United Kingdom. Last year, they won their second term in office, securing a majority of the seats at the Scottish Parliament under an electoral system designed to prevent majority governments. They're now the most popular political party in Scotland, and as part of their manifesto, they've promised to hold a referendum on Scotland's future in 2014.
At the moment, we control many areas through the devolution settlement, through the fact that we have our own Scottish Parliament, but we don't control all the powers. Some might say we don't control the most important powers: foreign affairs, defence, immigration and the economy. There's some things that you will almost inevitably share. It's not about a complete separation and casting ourselves off to the North Sea. It's about actually just having the social, economic levers by which we can make a difference to this country. And so the benefits of that, being able to tailor those policies to the best interest of the people of Scotland, that's absolutely invaluable and, of course, a very natural state to be in.
Scotland, with its small population of just 5 million, has traditionally provided a major contribution to the UK's armed forces. But the Scottish public have also often strongly opposed foreign policy decisions taken in London, whether it be the Iraq War or the decision to renew the UK's nuclear weapons system based on the west coast of Scotland. In an independent Scotland, Scottish troops would no longer be required to fight Britain's wars, and the UK's Trident nuclear-armed submarines would have to find a new home.
There is nothing right, nothing good, nothing honourable, nothing sensible about Britain replacing its obscene weapons of mass destruction. The contrast, friends, could not be clearer. Not for us, not for Scotland.
The Scottish ethos is to be a broker of peace, as opposed to perhaps an aggressor, which many have viewed UK policy to be in the recent past.
Foreign policy aside, there are stark differences between the way services such as education and health are provided north of the border. Scottish students pay no tuition fees to attend university, while their peers in England face a bill of up to $14,000 a year. Scottish priorities and attitudes also differ on other matters, such as immigration.
Having a smaller economy, being able to manage it becomes a heck of a lot easier. Scotland is a nation of innovators and inventors, from the telephone to tarmac to television to penicillin, but modern day technologies. Your cloning and your gaming, your biotech. Historically, it's overachieved as a nation. 3 of the world's top 100 universities here in Scotland. That's more than any other country of this size. So huge amounts of potential.
The SNP say independence will give Scottish governments the tools they need to comprehensively pursue Scottish interests. But their opponents say those interests can be better addressed within the United Kingdom.
Well, the union we have within the UK is a very strong political union, probably one of the strongest the world has seen. And we think that Scotland, and indeed the rest of the UK, would be weaker if Scotland were to separate from the rest of the UK.
Scotland, for many years, has been a heartland for the UK's Labour Party. It was in fact a UK Labour government that brought Scotland's devolved Parliament into being. But today the party is fighting to keep the union intact.
For us, there's a huge social union that occurs with our relationship with the rest of the UK. We're a relatively small nation, and I think we work better when we work together. I care about issues about poverty and unemployment in Glasgow, but I also care about issues of poverty and unemployment in Manchester or Birmingham or wherever they happen to occur. And I would want to work with like-minded colleagues to try and bring an end to those issues wherever they are, not just within Scotland. It's whatever the majority view is that maintains that's what democracy is about. And while there might be issues that I would disagree with on a case-by-case basis, I'm sure that there's as many that I would disagree with the SNP, probably more than I would with people in the north of England.
One key factor in the argument is the future of North Sea oil. Supporters of the union say Scotland, without the UK, would be left heavily dependent on the fortunes of the slowly diminishing volatile resource. But Scots are steadily tapping into a completely different kind of energy. This is Whiteley Wind Farm in Scotland. It's actually Europe's biggest onshore wind farm, with 140 of these giant turbines supplying enough power for up to 180,000 homes. Scotland has a disproportionate share of Europe's wind and tidal power potential, and many see the nation's future as a world leader in renewable energy. Last year alone, it attracted more than $1 billion of investment into its research and development of renewable energy, while potential investment is estimated at tens of billions of dollars. The SNP believes an independent Scotland, with a fully developed renewable energy industry, could earn $3 billion a year from exporting electricity, a significant achievement for a nation of just 5 million people. The UK government says it supports the drive towards green energy, but the Scottish Green Party has thrown its lot in with the separatists. So a vote for independence doesn't necessarily mean a vote for the Scottish National Party.
Energy is a really good example of where Scottish interests and UK interests are not the same. European level decisions are going to be made soon about the funding of cross North Sea infrastructure like high voltage direct current transmission lines, so that we can trade electricity efficiently across borders. Now that's a high priority if seen from the Scottish angle, but the UK energy ministers, their interests are in nuclear power stations for the south of England. That's where they see their energy gap. Scotland's interests are very different, and if you look at the energy picture from a Scottish angle instead of a London angle, I think you end up with very different solutions. But every time we debate it at Green Party conference, the chat very quickly moves on from independence as an end in itself into what would we use it for? How could Scotland transform? And the Green vision is one of much more decentralised government, local communities being able to take much more control of their own affairs rather than relying on a single centralised national government. And independence we see as a step towards that.
To try and understand the hopes, aspirations and fears young Scots have for their nation's future, I met with 4 friends who have very different views on independence.
Britain has gone all over the world and done everything possible to put down the native peoples that it's come into contact with, and they started with the Irish, the Welsh and ourselves. This whitewashing that's happened all over the world by Britain and other colonial powers, which destroys diversity, destroys native people's belief in themselves, and gives us the situation which we see today, where the Scots are not sure whether they want to make their own decisions. And I find that quite upsetting, but I feel that we can change that, we can turn that around, because I'm not the only one in this country who isn't scared of a hard day's graft. If you go back 30 years, you'll find the Macron report, which speaks about Scotland basically being rich to an embarrassing degree if we actually had access to our oil wealth at that time. What happened was that oil wealth was squandered on such things as Trident, while all our native industries, and that's the north of England and Wales and everywhere else as well, while all our native industries were destroyed.
The United Kingdom as a country has done things that some of us don't like. Probably all of us don't like some of the things the United Kingdom has done. But to wash our hands of those things and say they can go off and do those things and it's nothing to do with us, I don't think that's being responsible. I think that's being almost self-centred. I think we're much better off to remain involved and try and continue to direct the course that the United Kingdom as a country takes, rather than just Scotland. I'm sure there's many parts of northern England that would love to be separated from the south, but we're talking about Scottish independence based on a border that's many centuries old, and I don't know if the debate is entirely many centuries old or not?
For the most part, I'm for it. I do feel there's not enough information out there, and that what we really need from the main yes parties is some kind of plan on what they plan to do once we have independence. There's a whole lot of talk about money, and there's no real resolution. The parties are fighting amongst themselves as to whether or not we can support ourselves, or whether or not we'll get into the Euro or the European Union.
It's something that I'm very cautious about at the moment. There needs to be a lot more information. There needs to be more dialogue in communities, not like in the harder to reach communities, out in the suburbs, out in the schemes, out in the villages, everywhere. There has to be a stronger dialogue than just what's on the telly or you know, what we read in the daily news and stuff.
So there's this nebulous future that we don't quite know what might happen. Will we go with the euro? Will we go with the pound? Will we have our own currency? Who will be our trading partners? Will England be a trading partner? Will England be a competitor?
Professor David Miller has spent much of his career teaching and researching in Scotland. He says the SNP need to address the doubts and present a clearer vision of an independent Scotland.
There's a little bit of confusion about what's happening with the referendum. There's been a lot of scare stories about what it would mean, which are easy to do for the No campaign, and I think that's partly having an effect. I think the other question, though, is that no one really knows what independence means, and the SNP have found it difficult, I think, to explain that, partly because they're undecided and divided themselves, but I think it's difficult for them to say exactly what it would be, especially when they've come out and said several things which have then been flatly contradicted by other sources.
Support for independence among the working classes is proportionally higher than the middle classes in Scotland, with socialist political parties arguing that social justice and workers' rights can be better protected in a parliament closer to home, although not everyone agrees.
There is an argument which says anything which breaks up the United Kingdom, the British state, would be progressive in world historical terms. The British state has had a negative impact on the world for generations now. Along with that is that the Scottish polity is to the left in social democratic terms from the Westminster government, and therefore you're much more likely to be able to defend social democratic gains and perhaps extend them if you have independence. Against independence on the left, you have those who think that the Scottish economy couldn't survive, that we need the British economy to be part of potentially making progressive changes at an international level, as opposed to having a kind of what would be seen as a reactionary protectionist policy. We are seeing a process here, I think, where people get to grips with the idea that the Scottish National Party may not be as reactionary and nationalist as perhaps they think, but we're not at the stage yet where disaffection with the Tories will translate into support for independence.
The Scottish National Party says it will publish details of its vision for independence later next year, but ultimately it's the economic arguments that will be key.
The argument in public debate in Scotland is not very well developed. What you have is traded insults about whether Scotland could be like other successful small nations, which is the argument that came first. Then the financial crash comes, and the riposte comes, what, you mean you want us to be like small nations like Iceland and Ireland? No thank you very much. And that makes it very difficult for those who argue that we should be like a small Scandinavian social democracy. There's very little sense of what international financial capital does and how it can be fought back against. There's very little sense that nations can take particular steps to disrupt international financial capital. It makes it difficult. They can be isolated, that's true, but nevertheless it's only by nations or other forces taking those kinds of steps to stop the kind of global casino which has caused the crash, which is going to start to roll back the freedom of finance capital to do whatever it wants. And that argument is really nowhere in Scottish public life.
This time last year, polls showed that support for independence was in the lead. Today, those positions are reversed, with support for the Union significantly higher. The collapse of economies within Europe has served to increase fears among Scots on the financial risks of going it alone. On the other hand, Scots could find solace in independence, as the UK's Conservative-led government continues to impose severe public spending cuts across the board as part of its programme of austerity measures. The debate will continue. Scotland has 2 years before it needs to decide its destiny. Hassan Ghani for The Real News, Stirling, Scotland.